You know, when we think of the Middle Ages, we usually picture knights and castles, maybe a dragon or two, and that's about it. But what if I told you that this was actually an era of massive, radical transformation? A time when magic, monsters, and some truly revolutionary ideas laid the groundwork for the very world we're living in right now. Let's dig in and see how this totally misunderstood period actually shaped our modern reality.
But first, think about this for a second. Today, an idea can zip around the globe in an instant. It's nothing. But what happened back when information moved at the speed of a horse, on fragile parchment, in a world that was literally lit by fire? How could a single idea, in a world like that, possibly change everything? Well, that's the big question we're going to answer.
Okay, so our story really starts with language. For hundreds of years after the fall of the Roman Empire, if you were an educated person anywhere in Western Europe, anywhere, there was one language that connected you to everybody else, and that was Latin.
Latin's dominance was, it was absolute. You got to think of it as the operating system for all of medieval Europe. A student from England could waltz into a university in Italy and understand the lectures perfectly. A merchant from what's now Germany could read a legal contract in France, no problem. It was this single, invisible thread that connected the entire continent's elite.
But here's the thing. The powerful, the educated, they were a tiny, tiny fraction of the population. The vast majority of people didn't speak a single word of Latin. And so, slowly, over hundreds of years, this incredible linguistic revolution started to bubble up from below, as the languages of the common people, the ancestors of the languages we all speak today, finally started to rise. So out of this big shift, two major language families popped up that still dominate Europe. You had the Germanic languages, think English, German, which grew out of the dialects spoken by people living north of the old Roman borders. And then you had the Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, which evolved from the casual, everyday street Latin of Roman soldiers and traders. A totally different beast from the formal Latin of the scholars. And just to see how much things changed, take a look at this. This is Old English. It's almost unrecognizable, right? As a Germanic language, it looks and sounds completely foreign to us now.
But now, jump forward just a little over 200 years to Chaucer. And wow, what a dramatic shift. Suddenly, you can actually see our modern language starting to take shape. The spelling is a little funky, but you can read it. You know those words. The evolution was happening at an absolutely incredible speed.
And this is where it gets really important. For the first time ever, storytellers were speaking directly to the people in their own language. Epic poems, romances about heroes like Charlemagne and King Arthur, these became the first international bestsellers. They forged these shared cultures and national identities that, honestly, still echo today.
Now, these strange and wonderful stories weren't just entertainment. No, they really reflected a worldview where myth and reality were totally tangled up together. You have to remember, this was a time way before the scientific method. Knowledge didn't come from observation or experimentation. It came from the unquestioned authority of ancient books. Whatever they said went.
Get a load of this. This description comes straight from a 13th century encyclopedia. It's talking about other races of people, men with no heads and eyes in their shoulders. And this wasn't some fantasy novel. This was presented as factual knowledge, just passed down from ancient writers and accepted as, fact.
Right at the heart of medieval science was a belief system that might seem kind of out there to us today, astrology. But this wasn't some fringe thing you'd read in the back of a newspaper. It was a core subject taught in universities. The theory was that the planets influenced your personal mix of the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, and that mix determined your personality, your health, your whole destiny.
And this is the really wild part. The legacy of this belief is baked right into our everyday language. If something is disastrous, that literally means bad star. An ill-starred lover, same thing. If you're jovial, you have the happy temperament of the planet Jupiter. If you're mercurial, you're like Mercury. Without even realizing it, we are all still speaking the language of medieval astrology. How crazy is that? So, alongside astrology, the other great science of the age was alchemy. Now, its goals of turning lead into gold or finding an elixir of life, that sounds like pure fantasy. But the alchemists themselves were surprisingly practical. They ran meticulous experiments and they documented their results in detail, and in doing so, they completely, accidentally laid the foundations for modern chemistry. But even while all these mystical ideas were dominating the scene, a totally new way of thinking was starting to emerge. And it was born in these brand new institutions that were, Well, they were going to change the world forever. So the first universities weren't these grand ivy-covered buildings. They were basically unions or guilds for teachers. The Latin word was universitas, and their curriculum was almost entirely focused on one guy, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. The whole goal wasn't to discover new stuff, but to master and explain what the philosopher, as they called him, had already written. And getting a degree, that was just a license to teach his works to other people.
But then a new intellectual movement came along, the humanists, and they basically said, hey, focusing only on Aristotle is way too narrow. They went on this ambitious quest to recover all the lost knowledge of the ancient world, translating Greek poetry, history, and philosophy that had been pretty much hidden from Western Europe for 1,000 years.
And amidst all this reverence for old books, a few radical voices dared to suggest a completely different path. One of those was an English monk named Roger Bacon. And he argued that real knowledge doesn't come from old books, it comes from experimentation. And get this, back in the 1260s, he made some truly mind-blowing predictions. Horseless carriages, ships without oars, even flying machines. It's just a breathtaking vision of the future. And the simple, stunning truth is, he was right. But for his visionary ideas to actually become reality, the world was going to need a full-blown information revolution. And that, my friends, brings us to the climax. The single invention that completely shattered the medieval world and, in many ways, created our own. Before the mid-1400s, making a book was just a monumental effort. A scribe would have to spend months, sometimes years, painstakingly copying every single letter by hand onto expensive parchment made from animal skin. Each book was a priceless, one-of-a-kind work of art, and because of that, they were incredibly rare. Just to put that into perspective for you, when a rich guy wanted to start a library, he hired 45 scribes. Working flat out for nearly 2 years, they managed to produce just 200 books. 200! That was the speed of knowledge back then.
And then everything changed. The printing press arrived. There's this quote from one of the very first printed books that just captures the magic of it. It says the words were made not by writing with a pen, but by an ingenious invention. Movable type was here.
Okay, remember those 200 books? The ones that took 45 scribes 2 years to make? Well, in the first 50 years of the printing press, historians estimate that 8 million books were produced. 8 million! It was an information explosion on a scale nobody could have imagined. The cost of knowledge just plummeted, and for the very first time, ideas, both old and new, could spread like wildfire.
The printing press literally democratized knowledge. It took power from the hands of the few and gave it to the many. It fueled the Reformation, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution. It completely reshaped the world. And that brings us to a final, pretty crucial question. What invention is having that same transformative effect on our world right now?